internet is a typically on-rails experience. Despite over 30 trillion index pages, Google only captures 4% of all sites. As a result, it takes real effort to find yourself off the beaten path. To those who seek the strange and obscure, there are more rabbit holes to follow than you could ever hope to explore. The lesser-known corners of the internet are home to puzzling and sometimes sinister groups. Some take it a step further and go from sinister to insane. It's no surprise, then, that internet history is filled with cults. Search around the internet a bit, and you'll find it hiding in plain sight. The cult of Saturn, a conspiracy that supposedly has existed since time immemorial. Echoing the Gnostic myth of the demiurge, the insane god who has trapped us in this universe, Saturn here is equivalent to Satan, with his black cube representing our prison. To those who believe, it's obvious man has been worshipping the devil for millennia. Just look at the Kaaba of the Abrahamic religions, or Saturn's own black cube hidden in its hexagonal storm that the ancients somehow knew about. Like many conspiracies, information across time and borders is conflated in one linear mythic lineage. And like many conspiracies, its true origin is neither ancient or esoteric, but modern and engineered specifically to appeal to those who are disposed to accepting information if it's tied to historical records of fact. This will be a multi-part series exploring the story of a young woman named Tara, a British immigrant born in Kenya who moved to London when she was 16 and fell in with the wrong crowd. Souped up on ketamine and the party lifestyle, it didn't take long until she found herself in the clutches of the cult of Saturn. Sometime after leaving the cult behind, she enlisted her friend Richard to help tell her story. The so-called Trail of Deceit is but one layer to the mystery of this enigmatic group and the mythology behind it. In order to understand the sequence of events, we start not with Tara, but in the middle of the story with a strange job post in 2012 for a newspaper calling itself The False Prophet. The job posting was titled, "Idle Hands Wanted for Mysterious Job." The questionable nature of the listing became an ongoing mystery for the users of Above Top Secret in late 2012. Anyone who has worked in the creative and production industry or as a writer will know how competitive the industry is and how difficult it can be to find work. So given that this was a paying job, you won't be surprised to hear that a great proportion of the population of the London creative industry sent their resume to the email provided, falseprophet@live.com.au. The contact on the posting was for someone called Frank. A few months after the ad was posted, rumors started circulating through chat rooms and blogs that people had experienced strange things whilst being recruited for the job. Applicants were allegedly put through unorthodox methods of recruitment. They received cryptic messages, and their responses were often sent to other applicants, creating a strange scenario where applicants were in direct contact with each other without actually meeting the other person, or the recruiter. Whilst I can't attest to the truth of a large proportion of the latter rumors, I can state certainly as a fact that A, this job existed because a friend of mine who was an illustrator applied for the job, and B, it's true that there was at least some form of pranking happening in relation to the ad, because my friend was put through some strange ordeals himself. Though the rumors of the story gained its own level of embellishment, and it's certain that many stories were fabricated or hoaxes, so the line between what actually happened and what is fictional remains unknown. My friend was told to write a slanderous review about another applicant's work, and then received a slanderous review from another applicant about his work. Then he was given the contact details of the applicant and told to ring him up and destroy him psychologically if he wanted the job. This is where my friend opted out of the process because he found it too disturbing. But the stories that spread among Shoreditch trendies on blogs and on Facebook claimed that some people were called out to interviews at strange hours, only to find that no one was there, or that cryptic symbols or pictograms had been left at the address provided. Some claimed that people entered buildings in Old Street for an interview, only to be locked in with the lights off and messed around with psychologically. Some claimed they were told where to find a weapon and in order to kill somebody of importance, or people were given maps and told to drop parcels off to certain locations. There were even stories of people claiming to have been tortured in a mimicry to the Saw movies, or to have seen a dead body at a location provided, only to have it missing when they reported it. At some point, the stories got tied in with hysteria surrounding the film Donnie Darko. People claimed that if you navigated to a certain point in the Donnie Darko website, then a message came up which said,
"To get to level 3, you must find the book of the key and the lock."
I think there must have been other messages circulating at the time about level 2. Maybe level 2 was contacting Frank, I'm not sure. In any case, the stories got slowly embellished until the email address came to be known as the address of some contact within the Illuminati, or even the Antichrist himself. Here we're introduced to two things that will soon become important: a mysterious person named Frank and the book of the key and the lock. It seemed Frank created a fake job posting in order to put applicants through some sort of psychological test. But why? One user of the forum claimed he was able to get in contact with Frank, and this was his response.
I've heard it said that the Book of the Dead none may read, for peril or strife, and yet all are written to the Book of Life. There is another book, which is rarely kept in stock. But he who seeks wisdom, may seek for the Book of the Key and Lock. In dreams I saw that fabled ninth gate. High upon the key, marries the lock. But beyond the language of all mythologies, Loki begins Ragnarok.
Back to Tara. Our story begins 2 years prior. I joined a group called the Cult of Saturn in about 2010. One of the most disturbing groups in modern times, and who few are probably familiar with. They worship the planet Saturn. This is not some conspiracy about a fictional group either. I'm talking about a real group of people who have met an actual cult. I'm teaming up with a more internet-savvy friend, thanks Rich, to publish my own experiences as well as archive all the information I have and we can find about this group and their activities. Part self-confession and part expose. There's a lot of information here, but some really disturbing and interesting stuff. I urge you to read it all and spread the info around. Let me just say that it gets really weird. About me. I live and work in London, raised in the north. I was born in Nairobi. My dad is from Kenya originally. My mom is from South Africa. I moved to North London when I was about 16. I got in with the wrong sort of crowd whilst living in Northeast London. A bunch of guys and gals who were into ketamine, and I lost touch with reality for a while. Rich is from Australia and has done his own internet research on this. We met through a mutual friend online and have come together to work on this project. Falling deeper and deeper into the drug-fueled world of the London party scene, Tara became connected to two individuals through Christian, her boyfriend at the time. My story starts when I met a guy called Christian McManus. Christian was this lovably confused rebel type of a guy who left a trail of angry girlfriends behind him. I think we had a mutual friend and I wound up at a party in Finsbury Park that he was at. We dated for a bit, I guess you could call it that, slept together a few times and sort of hung out drunk. He was in a few grunge bands and half connected to the punk scene, half connected to the hipster scene in East London. We used to hang around thrift shops drunk in the middle of the afternoon, and he would tell me how drugs had the power to open up your third eye, and how all human affairs were linked to the planets and the stars, and how every culture had this archetype linked to the planet Saturn, and the symbolism of death and divorce as an essential part of life. I found it interesting. He never seemed like too much of a whack job. I should have known something was up with him back then, I guess. But he was my initial into this group who I became connected with. The start of the weirdness. Below, some of the warehouse parties I would hang with these guys. A lot of the people recognizable in the story are here. Christian, Frank, Lucy, Daniel. Faces obscured because I don't want to incriminate in social media. It was around this time that Tara met Lucy. A really close friend, Lucy, I met through Christian, became my closest confidant. She was lots of fun, and I admired her courageous spirit and strength of character. Also, her ability to maintain a kind of power even amidst wild groups of horny tween and adolescent boys. She used to recommend me all these books to read. Kerouac and Hunter Thompson, Burroughs, and all the other authors that a fun-loving, druggy, and sexually experimenting 20-something comes to admire. This is the first physical appearance of the key players in this saga, Frank and Lucy. Tara didn't know it yet, but these two would be the ones who organized much of the cult's activities, both online and off. Christian used to trip out on ketamine sometimes, and he would just lie on his back, almost catatonic, and say to me, "Tara, you need to find the book of the key and the lock. Tara, have you found the book yet?" At first, Tara didn't suspect anything about her new friends. Growing up in a strict Christian household, it's unsurprising that she would gravitate toward an ideology that would allow her to separate herself from the religious zeal of her parents. Not yet introduced to Frank at this point, she started to become close with Lucy, a creative, artistic, and well-read woman who seemed eager to show Tara new worlds of information. In the hazy dream world of ketamine abuse and partying, it was Christian who first brought the book of the key and the lock to Tara's attention. But did the book exist? And if it did, what was it? I didn't take him seriously, of course, at the time. However, a couple years later, I would be searching for this book everywhere. There are a lot of really crazy libraries in England, and if you can't find a book here, there tends to be something amiss. But I can tell you this book is not in any stock in any library in the world. I've searched for it everywhere. According to Richard, The only page anyone claims to have seen from this book is the insert title page, which is an etching from William Blake's Death's Door. It seemed that whatever the book might be, it was impossible to find, which only amplified its secretive and occult status online. There were some who said they had read it, but no single claim proved credible. I could see vast collections of numbers, which looked like crop circle formations, and these patterns which I knew to be something like elder numbers, which transcended lower level numbers, such as our numeral system. Presumably, these numbers were the numbers of the gods. I could recognize some symbols, precisely such as the symbol pi. Others I had never seen before, but somehow knew as well. There were pages of what looked like ornate door keys, then pages of patterns, what seemed to be called the rings. Then, after these pages, there began the real script. It was in a language I couldn't read or decipher, but every page was also illustrated. The book was illustrated beautifully. Every detail was perfectly in place and full of symbolism, like a deck of tarot cards seeming to throw a divine light over everything that had ever existed. Each letter filled me with a pure joy and made me appreciate and love my life and the universe. It's important to remember that Frank was clearly someone who understood what it took to propagate a meme throughout the dark corners of the internet. It's not inconceivable that a bulk of the speculation about the book was done by him, or carried out by someone else for him under his direction. As we will see in a moment, the game-like nature of the clues and breadcrumbs left around the internet perhaps served to disarm the skepticism from those interested in order to lull them deeper into the cult. While Tara got closer to Christian's friends, many of whom were acquainted with Frank and Lucy's group, at the same time there was a strange ongoing thread on 4chan's paranormal board that was apparently capable of driving people to madness, and all roads led back to the false prophet. This is the point where things begin to take a dark turn. As we saw in the beginning, Frank, or the false prophet, was not above using psychological games to break people down mentally, and Tara unknowingly was about to dive headfirst into the eye of the storm. The thread that would be dubbed Voices of X started off innocently enough. However, it would only devolve from there. What is Vox? A proposition just devised in another thread for an open journal in which members of X may record their everyday experience of synchronicity, psychedelic experiences, and any other experiences relating to the riddle box of life, either live on this forum or remembered from previous experiences of synchronicity or reiterated from members' own personal synchronicity journals. The purpose? To study and analyze the phenomena of synchronicity using scientific methods and create theories as to what synchronicity really is. A Reddit post, possibly written by members of the cult, summarizes the history of the thread, with some in the comments calling the experiment the creation of a human Ouija board. This is a true story. I'm new here, usually a 4chaner. Just came to share this story because I thought you would like it. Sometime last year, a group of Anons on the 4chan paranormal board X randomly decided to start a journal recording their experience of synchronicity. Synchronicity is a phenomenon coined by Carl Jung and is defined as the meaningful occurrence of unrelated events with no causal relation. They had no idea what they would find, not being religious or spiritual in any sense. This, however, seemed to be the only phenomena which they could say they had a genuine curiosity in and wanted to try and get to the bottom of what it could possibly mean, if anything. The journal was called Voices of X, or Vox, and encouraged people to record any events which they thought were out of the usual or would even make them seem crazy. Here are some of the early threads. I don't have many of them archived, unfortunately. What happened is that the more the Anons recorded these seemingly random events in their lives, the more they started to notice dark patterns within the events, and joined the dots more and more. Instead of reaching some great summit of enlightenment as they were hoping, they found instead that the imbued meaning seemed to point to some altogether dark or demonic force at work. For instance, repeated incidents involved the words hell or rape. Racking their brains to cope with the stress of the potential implications of these findings, the journal itself started to become more and more of a group therapy session than anything else, and severely took its toll on the members who participated. Some felt that they were turning schizophrenic or that they had perhaps become possessed by demons of dark alien forces of some variety. The original creator of the journal got so worn down by it all that they had to take their leave of 4chan and spend some time in a psych ward. One by one, the people who took up the reins of the journal also found that the stress became too much for them, and they felt as though they were pursuing a dark and troublesome route that they could no longer continue to walk. The journal slowly became yet another urban legend and was discontinued permanently. At various attempts to revive the journal, non-participants notice other eerie things about the journals themselves. In fact, many of the threads seem to contain individual focus points. That is, in a particular thread, there was a running theme of synchronicities, all shared by the contributors. For instance, repeated instances of the word snake. Some Anons have claimed that each of these individual events can be translated to a letter of the alphabet, and that across all the separate threads, a message is spelled out. Not everyone agrees with this, however, and many argue that this is more evidence that synchronicity and all kind of magical thinking such as this display only the ability humans have to see patterns where there are none. Nevertheless, those that claim the message exists agree what is spelled out was something like, "The ghost in the machine points to the false prophet." There are also many interpretations as to what the message itself could mean. Some say that somebody deliberately hijacked the journal with these particular entries for the sake of viral marketing for some online magazine called The False Prophet, which ties into an alternate reality game that was played last year that involves this countdown website. A website which is constantly counting down to certain dates and has a series of passwords, kind of like a maze in itself. First passwords are high key and low key for your own interests. May not be relevant to the story. Some tie it to a conspiracy theory relating to an Illuminati agent who revealed himself at the end of the Mayan calendar. Most skeptical people believe that the journal indicates nothing, and sadly ended their last lingering thread of belief in anything at all. Was the journal hijacked by supernatural forces? Was this really a case of the cursed journal of 4chan? Or is this just the overactive imaginations of Anons? Is synchronicity a genuine spiritual phenomenon? And if so, does it imply some evil, overarching whisper in the darkness? Perhaps these things are never to be known by humans. But if you ever want to know, maybe you could start keeping a journal yourself. Get your friends involved and post it up on the internet. But remember, you have been warned. There might just be a ghost in the machine. This is where our story ends for now. Next time, we will explore the strange mythology of the cult of Saturn and Tara's escalating involvement with the Inner Circle. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of the cult of Saturn. Again, I'm Medalist, and I hope to see you when we next dive into obscure strands of thought from around the internet and throughout history.